All right, I'm going to speak with a piece of paper this time. Last town hall, I just spoke off the cuff and forgot a few things. So I'm going to start with a piece of paper. Welcome to Congressman Brad Schneider's town hall. My name is Jake Kaplan, and I serve as Congressman Schneider's district director and deputy chief of staff. Thank you so much for being here. Your participation is what makes these conversations meaningful and impactful. I also want to welcome everybody joining us via live stream and YouTube and Facebook. We're glad to have you with us. Please feel free to submit your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring those throughout the event. A few quick acknowledgements before we get started. First, I wanted to thank Melanie Cohen and the team at the Northbrook Theater, the Northbrook Park District, for graciously hosting us tonight, as well as the Northbrook Police Department, Houston Security. Since we're in a shared public space, we ask everyone to be respectful, courteous, so we continue to have a productive and inclusive discussion. To keep things fair, we're using a random lottery system to select audience questions. Ari, do I see Ari? Ari may be out there. We'll be polling questions and numbers out of the tickets that you all should have. I have randomly selected 5 questions just to get us started. We have microphones here and here. So what I ask you to do is, once I called your number, if you can begin, if you'd still like to ask your question, you don't have to, but if you'd still like, you can start lining up here. I ask that you keep your question to about a minute so we can get to as many questions as possible. But this is a way we've just decided is the most fair method in asking or polling questions, because I know a lot of folks have questions. If we don't get to your question tonight, please do not hesitate to reach out to our office. You can call us at 847-383-4870. I have cards with that number on it. You can also, there are members of the team here and here. We'll raise our hand at the end as well. You can come up to us. We have business cards. We have our emails and personal lines on there. So if you don't get to get your question answered today, we'll be sure to get back to you in any capacity. All right, that's enough of me. Before I introduce the congressman, let me pull those numbers that I just pulled out randomly here. So check your tickets. I'm only going to look at the last 3 digits. That's the easiest way. Last time I was doing this, I was doing like 15 numbers, if you might remember. I figured out a better way, a better method. All right, so these are the numbers that I'm going to call, and then we will continue to randomize these as we go. So we're going to continue to do another poll after this one, but these are just the first 5. I have 872, 869, and by the way, Ari, when she gets up here, she's going to write these on the board. She's over there. She's going to write these on the board. So the first one was 872, 869, 873, 823, and 817. Okay. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Congressman Brad Schneider.
Hello, good evening. Is this working? Can you hear me? All right, good. Before we start, let me ask everyone to rise and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Thank you. I was not cut out for the bright lights, so I'm going to squint. I apologize. But anyway, I hope everyone had a nice holiday weekend, and over the course of the weekend that you had a chance to reflect on Memorial Day. We kicked off the holiday Friday, as I do every year, at College of Lake County with a beautiful ceremony. Reading this year, what we did was we read the names of every member of the military who made the ultimate sacrifice since 2001. And it still took almost 45 minutes to go through those names. Every member from Illinois. But we should honor them always throughout the year, but it's good to have the Memorial Day and the Memorial Day weekend to reflect on those who made the sacrifice for the freedoms that we all hopefully never take for granted, but enjoy every single day. That said, I will tell you, we are in a moment, I believe, of existential crisis for our constitutional republic. We are seeing day in and day out more tests of the Constitution, the articles creating the legislative, executive, and judiciary branch, the president, ignoring rulings coming from the court, challenging the authorities granted the president by laws created by the legislative branch, and we see this going on every day. It's something that I will tell you, my colleagues and I have been working very hard to defend, protecting the responsibilities, the constitutional duties of Congress vis-a-vis the other two branches, and working. Members of Congress and Congress can't file a lawsuit, but supporting many of the lawsuits that have been filed, challenging some of the actions of the administration, many of which the court has ruled violate the Constitution. In fact, just today there was another ruling saying that the administration's actions, the president's actions against law firms like this case, specifically Wilmer Hell, were a violation of free speech, and that continues. So we'll continue within Congress. Our focus is what we can do, supporting litigation. We have a rapid response litigation team. Among members of that team include Jamie Raskin, who is a constitutional scholar. It helps to have a constitutional scholar on your team, always, but especially at this time. We are introducing legislation where we can. For an example, a bill I have introduced, the DOJ Accountability and Transparency Act, Data Act, requiring DOJ to submit on a weekly basis what it is doing, what data it's accessing, what progress is being made, just so we know. Transparency is, well, they say transparency is the greatest disinfectant. Transparency is critical for us to know what is happening. Introduced a bill that would try, I mean, one of the things, and this is not a new, it's something that's has proceeded over the last number of years, or really decades, of Congress relinquishing its responsibility for trade policy, for tariffs, to the executive branch. The president's using something called IEPA, which is a bill from the 1970s, to declare a national emergency. It's questionable. It's really not questionable. There's not a national emergency. We're not at war per se, but he's using that to impose tariffs across the board, and then unimpose them. You may have seen that the president announced 25% tariffs on iPhones, as well as 50% tariffs across the board on the European Union. That was on Friday, and within 48 hours, that was reversed. For large companies like Apple, they can figure out how to navigate it. The companies that are really getting hammered are small middle market companies that produce goods, maybe sell $20 million, $100 million of product in the United States and around the world, importing product, and the cost of their inputs are going up 40, 50, 100%, which creates constant problems. I've talked to several companies here in the 10th district that are really struggling. They're trying to plan. The president can put tariffs on Friday and lift them on Sunday. That's one thing. But what these companies have to do is decide what to bring in for manufacturing a month from now. Or if in the retail business, they're trying to bring in their goods now for the Christmas holiday season. And those tariffs are really hard on them to decide, do they make that order to bring those goods? Will they get in time? The China tariffs are a great example. They were 140%, and now they're down to 30%, which is still high. But these companies are trying to figure out what to do. And they aren't able, because they don't know if these tariffs are going to be on or off, to make a decision to say, well, we'll find a supplier here, or we'll stand up manufacturing here. So those are companies that are having a real problem. When I was on the small business committee for 3 of my terms, and I had a line I used all the time. I said, there's really 4 things that businesses need. One is a business model, and that's for them to develop. We can't really help them. Government shouldn't be helping define what business you or anybody else is in. But the next 3 are really critical: access to talent, access to capital, and a stable business political environment. Access to talent is making sure we're educating our workforce to be the best trained, most productive workforce in the world. And we're constantly re-engineering and redefining and rethinking how we train our students, even our adults, for not where we are today, but where we want to be tomorrow, a generation from now. Access to capital is how do we make sure that our companies can access capital at the lowest price possible in the world, that they can compete in a global economy and put their resources to work, to take that talent, to make things, whether it's manufactured goods or to create ideas, services, and to compete in a global economy. And then the stable business, stable political environment is just ultimately necessary for people to make decisions, not just tomorrow or a week from now, but to make long-term decisions of where to invest, to start a new product line, or to open a new manufacturing facility, or to invest and develop new people for the next generation of services that they may want to provide. And right now, our companies around the district, around the country are really struggling. So that's something we're fighting very hard to support. Which leads me to the news of the last week. You may have watched the whole process with the House reconciliation or tax bill. If you were watching all of it, I know you're an insomniac because much of it started late. This is a bill that they've been working on this reconciliation process. And what reconciliation is a process by which legislation dealing with revenues or expenses, it has to be budget related, pass through a Senate debate with limited time. So there's no cloture vote required, meaning they don't need 60 votes in the Senate. But there's very strict rules of what can be included and how it works together. And the first thing you have to do is pass a budget resolution saying these are the dollars we're going to spend or the dollars we're going to bring in for each of the various committees in the House and the Senate. And this was a couple months ago, and Republicans pushed it through. And if you were watching at that time, you heard Democrats saying the Republicans just announced that they were going to cut Medicaid by upwards of $800 billion. And the Republicans were saying, no, that's not true. We're not cutting Medicaid. We're not cutting the CHIPS program, the support, SNAP, supplemental nutrition assistance program for hungry families. We're not touching any of that. And the bill that they passed, that resolution, didn't say you were going to necessarily touch that. But what it said is that the Energy and Commerce Committee had to cut $880 billion. And 90+% of the budget of the Energy and Commerce Committee that they oversee, that they have jurisdiction, is CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program, Medicaid. 70 million Americans rely on Medicaid. 41% of births are covered by Medicaid. It's Medicare. And only a small sliver is other things. So if they're going to cut $880 billion, it's got to come from somewhere. But they said they weren't going to do it, so they had to make sure people weren't watching. So they had their hearings overnight. So 2 weeks ago, you saw the Energy and Commerce Committee, my committee, Ways and Means, and the Agriculture Committee have their hearings to consider the legislation that would meet the numbers defined in that budget resolution. Ways and Means started at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. We finished at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, going all the way straight through. You may have also seen the video of my colleague Blake Moore sleeping. I'm not going to criticize him. There were moments when all of us were dozing off. It's hard, especially at our age, to stay up all night long. But they hit it for a reason. They were hiding the ball. And then last week, as the combined bills that went through, Ways and Means was 18 hours, Energy and Commerce 27 consecutive hours. They went overnight and into the afternoon. And the Agriculture Committee was packaged into a single bill and brought to the Rules Committee. And so they started the debate on the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee decides which amendments will be allowed to go to the floor for consideration. And they have control. The majority always controls the Rules Committee. It's very powerful. So we knew that they were going to not allow any amendments to the bill that they had put together. But we brought over 500, the Democrats brought over 500 amendments to be considered at that hearing, the Rules hearing. And the Speaker, Mike Johnson, scheduled that hearing with all those amendments to begin at 1 a.m, because that's when you do business if you want to have people watch it. They started at 1 a.m. It was really Tuesday night, but technically Wednesday morning. And they went all the way consecutive. They finished at 11 p.m. Without a break. And so if you watched any of it, you would have seen the contentiousness. And as I mentioned, none of the amendments were passed. These were amendments to try to protect children's programs that gave school lunches, to try to protect Medicaid that's providing for 2/3 of all seniors in nursing homes are covered by Medicaid. These were the things we were trying to protect. Of course, none of that happened. And then we had debate on the floor on Thursday morning at 5:50 a.m. is when I had my chance to speak on the floor against the bill. At 7 o'clock, we voted on the bill, and it passed by 1 vote. But that's the reconciliation bill. 14 million people will lose their health care insurance because of it. About 8.5 million on Medicaid. The remainder are losing it because of cuts to the Affordable Care Act. Millions of families are going to lose their programs to help access to programs to help put food on the table. Estimated 3.5 million children will go hungry because of this bill. It's cutting programs for veterans. It is adding, for all of that, adding $5 trillion to our debt over the next, well, this is another one of the gimmicks. Normally we measure things in 10 years. They cut this to 9 years, so the number wouldn't be so big. So $5 trillion over 9 years. If the programs and policies in this bill were to pass and become permanent, it would add $45 trillion over the next 30 years. Why that gets dangerous is you saw also last Friday, Moody's lowered the credit rating in the United States. That raises the interest rate. And every 1% rise in interest rate adds about $350 billion, a little bit less per year in interest expense to the United States obligations. So as rates right now, last week the rate peaked at just over 5%. The assumption in their models is 3.6%. You're talking about $45 trillion additional debt compounded with higher interest, and you can see where the problem is. So the Senate will decide where it goes from here. I can't tell you what the Senate's going to do. 4 Republicans have 4 votes to give before the bill would fail. There are Republicans like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul who say the cuts don't go far enough and might vote against it. There are folks like Lisa Murkowski and others who are saying we can't cut Medicaid. I'm forgetting the guy from Missouri. Josh Hawley. Never thought I would say anything nice about Josh Hawley. But Josh Hawley has said he can't, his state, in Illinois, it's 1 in 3 births are covered by Medicaid. In Missouri, it's much higher. And to cut people who desperately rely on Medicaid for their health insurance will be horrible. It's not just the health insurance, though, because those dollars, even though Medicaid is the lowest reimbursement plan for folks, that hospitals get the lowest reimbursement on Medicaid patients, it is a stable source of income for these hospitals, in particular rural hospitals, and they will go under. And it's estimated that hundreds of hospitals across the country will collapse if this bill becomes law. So that's the latest from Washington. I could talk about a whole bunch of other things. I want to get to questions real quickly. I will finish on one sad note. Last week before I came home after the vote, so we voted about 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 on Thursday morning. As we were preparing to vote that evening, there was news about a double homicide in Washington, where sadly someone from Chicago, had to be from somewhere. I wish he was from somewhere else. A gentleman murdered 2 young people, a couple that were supposed to get engaged next week in Jerusalem, coming out of an event. There's so much to this tragedy, but the event was at the Washington Jewish Museum, and it was hosted by the American Jewish Committee. It was a young leaders event, a young diplomatic leaders event, and it brought a bunch of people together to talk about finding pathways to peace, finding ways to build bridges between people and between countries, and looking towards a better and brighter future. And Yaron and Milgram were just murdered in cold blood. I went, a number of us, after the vote, I organized, and a half dozen of us went to lay flowers at the museum. And I thought there'd be nobody there. We would just quietly lay flowers. We got there. There was a bunch of people gathered. There were 40 cameras from around the world. And I talked about these two young people and their dreams for the future, and the fact that we can't let their lives be without meaning, and their deaths can't be the end of their story. We all can find, hopefully, inspiration in the message, the last message they were trying to deliver to the world, that there is another way, a way of peace and working together and finding common bonds between people rather than trying to find division. And I hope as we move forward, we can honor their memories and work to bring a better world, not just here in the United States, but around the world. So thank you. And let me open up for questions. 872. Okay. You want to just take the microphone and move it around?
Test.
Hi, I'm Ellen from Waukegan. Can everybody hear me?
I'll repeat the question.
Ellen from Waukegan. Oh. And we were all taught that no one is above the law. And the Supreme Court had made a decision that the president has immunity if on presidential callings. Is there any way that can be revisited? I think it's gone to his head. I know it's gone to Bondi's head. It's gone to Levitt's head. And needless to say, it's gone to Trump's head that he can do anything. So is there any way that can be revoked?
Did everyone hear the question? Okay, so the question was that the Supreme Court last year ruled effectively that whatever the president does is above the law, as long as it's in official duties. Anything can be declared official duties. And is there anything that can be done to address that? First, let me touch on some of the impacts of what that implies. If anything is okay, then the president can create a meme coin, which is a fiction, can offer dinner to whoever buys the most of his meme coin, among whom were 50 people who have in their wallets, it's where you keep these things electronic. It was reported that many of them are trafficking in hateful meme coins, a coin that's the N-word, or another one that says F the Jews. I mean, you can run through the list of this, as well as someone bought $1 million worth of that meme coin, went to meet with the president at a dinner on Thursday night, and over the weekend, her son was pardoned after being convicted of basically bribery and extortion, convicted by a jury. It is selling, there's no question this is selling access and selling influence or outcomes, which in any other time, any time we recognize it as corrupt, any other time would be criminal. I don't know if you saw Speaker Johnson was on CNN on one day this weekend. It's hard enough in general with a 3-day weekend. It was either Saturday or Sunday. And Jake Tapper asked him, he said to the speaker, he said, you guys were all in chasing Hunter Biden. And I'm not going to defend Hunter Biden at all, but they were chasing Hunter Biden. He says, why aren't you doing the same thing with the president's family? And the speaker's comment was, well, what the Bidens did earned them, he mentioned the name, the criminal Biden family or Biden criminal family, whatever it was. He said, what Trump and the Trump family are doing is out in the open, so it's okay. I mean, that's almost a direct quote, to which I say, doing it out in the open doesn't make it any less criminal, only makes it more brazen. And what we're seeing because of that ruling is a brazen disregard for the law. So as far as what can happen, the most direct approach is for the court in a different case to say, we messed up, we're flipping the precedent, and what the president does has to be within the constructs of the law. The law applies to everybody, which is how I was raised and what I ultimately believe. We can work on legislation or constitutional amendment, legislation with a Republican House that is willing to follow the president's order, no matter what it is. We'll see on the Senate. That pathway seems further ahead. But the most important thing we need to do is keep a light on it, keep a record of all of it, and hopefully someday have the chance to hold the president to account.
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Eric from Lindenhurst. Congressman, you already touched on the subject about tariffs. So just quickly, is there anything Congress can do about the tariff situation?
So the question's on what can Congress do about the tariff situation. I think one of the most important things we can do, I could have said it this way in the opening. When I first got to Congress, I like to say I play on 3 teams. Team USA, number 1. Team Congress, number 2. And by that, I mean the prerogatives of Congress is defined in Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 2 is the executive branch. Article 3 is the judiciary. 3 co-equal branches will point out that we're number 1. We come first. And we need to pull back our authorities, our prerogatives, our responsibilities, and jealously protect them. And then only third, Team Red versus Team Blue. Unfortunately, that split between red and blue seems to take primacy over everything else. We need to reevaluate, and we've got legislation. I mentioned my bill on tariffs, Susan Delbene. A number of us on the Ways and Means Committee have introduced a series of bills that will try to reestablish the responsibility for tariffs rest within the Congress, specifically within the House of Representatives, and precisely within the Ways and Means Committee. So that's why we're initiating this legislation. We should be the ones who issue those tariffs, determine when they're applied, and it's up to the executive to execute on those orders, not to decide on Friday to announce tariffs on Sunday to draw the tariffs back. So that we'll continue to work on that. We need on all these things. Right now, it's well, we've lost a number of members of Congress on the Democratic side. It started at 220 to 215 in the House. We're at 212 right now. There's 220. So the Republicans can afford to lose no more than 4 votes. So we just need 5 Republicans to join us to say that the president's overstepping his authority on tariffs, overstepping his authority on attacking these law firms, overstepping his authority on trying to destroy our universities. So. Got it.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. My name is Julissa, and I'm from Vernon Hills. And my question is, what is your position and your colleagues on the government defunding education, universities, research programs in the health and science fields?
So the question is my position on government defunding universities, research institutions in health and science. Julissa, with your permission, I'm going to expand that and talk about education in general. I'll talk also about health and science. So I'm a 3rd generation American. My grandparents and great-grandparents came from Europe. Because of the education that my grandparents, and particularly my parents, were able to get. My dad went to public school, was the first in his family to go to university, became a CPA, was able to provide for his family. His 3 kids were able to go to college, and now we're raising our kids, and all have, well, the last of my dad passed away a few years ago, but my mom, 8 grandchildren, the last 2 start college in the fall. And the reason we believe college is right for us, and I'll come back and say college is not necessarily the path for everyone, is because it opens doors and opens opportunities and allows people to live the American dream. And shutting down access to universities threatens the American dream. I know when I was in school, I know schools around our country today have many foreign students. I'm going to come to your answer, but I'm going to touch on that topic today as the president's trying to prevent foreign students from coming to our schools. And those students come here, many of them deciding to make their home here. And if you look at the Fortune 500 companies, 1 in 3 have at least one of their founders as someone who came to this country born somewhere else. It drives our economy. Many of those folks become engineers. In fact, a majority of graduate engineering students, and even more so, it's a majority among masters, it's even more so in PhD within engineering, speak with an accent different from an American accent. But they are pursuing ideas and developing next generation innovations that grow the American economy and assure that the United States stays at the cutting edge. And a lot of those aren't just in engineering. On the biological science, the same is true. And those are the next cutting edge discoveries that are not just going to extend our lives, but extend the quality of our lives and make us healthier. It's not just enough to live longer. We want to live healthier and have full, healthful lives. That is an ecosystem that has made the United States university system and the research systems, and I'll add the National Institutes of Health, which works hand in glove with those university systems, which then support basic science, leads into the economy, the commercialization of those ideas that drive our economy, has made it for the last number of generations the envy of the world. The rest of the world looks to the United States. And look, I'm glad. I mean, it's another question. I'll talk about it. I'm sure someone may ask about it. But the guy who had his head eaten by a worm, brain eaten by a worm, I know who it is. But Kennedy just announced that he is no longer recommending the COVID vaccine for people without research behind it. It's just willy-nilly. I am proud that the vaccines that saved millions of lives around the world, that the world all aspired to acquire, and because they acquired them, all was able to come out of COVID, were developed by companies based in the United States. Working with scientists around the world, but it's the United States ecosystem driving that innovation that is so critical and so important. And what this administration is doing by literally cutting the feet and then the knees and literally chopping away at the foundations of our intellectual capital, the seed corn of the innovation that built this country and will lead us for the next generation, is, if he is successful, if they are successful, is going to diminish our ability to compete in the world, to lead in the world, to provide for our kids the future that my grandparents, my parents, and now me for my kids have been able to provide. And so that's why I am so concerned about what they're doing, and will do everything I can to make sure that our universities stay the best in the world, that our research stays at the cutting edge. And not every, I was meeting with some medical researchers, and I told them before I said this, as I'm joking, so I'm telling you I'm joking, but I said, I get the concerns, because 9 out of 10 basic science projects lead nowhere. So we should stop funding those 9 and just focus on the one that's successful. And the guy I was talking to turned ghost white. I said, no, I know that you have to chase a lot of dead ends to find the path to the breakthrough for the future. And Thomas Edison, who tried 10,000 times to perfect his light bulb, said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And those innovations help. Failures, how many of you use Post-it notes? Right? Post-it notes was a failed super glue. Right? So we've got to continue to invest in that research. So thank you.
3, and then we'll have 817, and then Ari's going to draw 5 more and put them on the board. So we have 823. That's right here. Excellent.
Ari, why don't you draw the 5 and put them on the board for the next round, and then people will be able to see them coming up.
Thank you. My name is Art Schwank. I live in Lincolnshire, and very concerned about, obviously, what's going on in our government, the economic climate, our values, our legal foundation, the financial world, looking at the bond market, the dollar value. It seems to me that everything that people have lived here for a while or grown up here have appreciated and valued is being stolen or is collapsing all at once by a gang of mobsters or amateurs. Is there anything that that Congress can do to kind of slow this down even more? I know we're using the legal system as much as possible, but it seems to me that this is out of control. They're playing with firecrackers and dynamite, and they don't know what they're doing.
Did everyone hear the question? All right, I'll repeat the question. I'm going to summarize it. Everything we held dear, the successes we celebrated for the last 248 years, seem to be crumbling in front of our eyes by the actions of this administration, who are undermining, undercutting, or destroying all of those things. Did I get that right? Okay. And then the question was, and what can Congress do about it? And I ask this question every day. We're talking amongst ourselves. We can slow it down. I have a metaphor. I don't love it, but I'll use it here anyway. There are times I feel like I'm playing pickleball with both feet nailed to the court, both hands tied behind my back. I don't have a racket, and they get to serve 10, 20, or 30 balls all at once. And that's, they have this idea of flood the zone or muzzle velocity, all of these things. And in the game I just described, I don't get the chance to necessarily win any points, but I have a goal to stay standing. That's resilience. I'll come back to that in a second. And to block or slow down what they're doing. And we've been doing that. So I mentioned these hearings that went 17 hours, 27 hours, the rules meeting that started at 1 a.m. and went all the way around 22 hours later, finished at 11. And then you had the debate on the floor of the House in the wee hours of the night. None of us want to be up that late, right? It's not fun, but it's important that we do that to shine as bright a light as possible on what's happening. And we did. And so it slowed it down a little. They still hit the Memorial Day goal. But now my Republican colleagues are back home in their district, and you're reading reports about this, having to answer for what they voted for, having to explain why they said they would never cut Medicaid and they just voted to cut it by $700 billion, or why they would never let kids go hungry and why they voted to cut the SNAP program, or why veterans are their number one priority, but they're turning their back on these veterans programs that are going to take away their health care. You can just run down that list. So that's one of the things we can do. The litigation is slowing it down. Now there's a big Supreme Court case on, can district courts in one area of the country issue an injunction that applies to the whole area of the country? This has been a problem for both people on both sides of any issue, because one judge can say that whatever isn't constitutional and it has to run through the system. That slows the system down. It will frustrate you if what you're trying to do is something that you think is a good versus a bad. But doing that and having that process, I think net is critical, because it ensures that what we do as a nation, A, is consistent across the whole country, and B, does fall within the construct of our Constitution. Because we're not a perfect species. The Constitution says in order to form a more perfect union, trying to go there, we have these processes. At the end of the day, what it boils down to is public sentiment. And I paraphrase Abraham Lincoln on this. He said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can do anything. Without it, nothing is possible. And so if we can get people to understand what's at stake, what's being done, whether it's destroying those institutions or cutting education or just undermining the rule of law or undercutting the values that have defined this country for so long, if we can sway that public opinion, first it will slow it down, and ultimately it can flip. And the key thing for me is flipping control of the House. As long as the Republicans control the House, like I said, it's a very narrow majority, one of the narrowest in our history. But what the Republicans showed last week, a 215, 214 vote is still a win. A 214, 215 vote is a loss for the president, and we can slow it down. So that's going to be the key thing.
New 5 and 824 is next.
I'll read if you can't see it. 824, 843, 875, 826, and 839.
Can you hear me?
Speak just right into
Like this?
Right? As close as possible.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lisa from Deerfield. In fact, you've been at my house. My daughter used to work for you. but I have some questions. I have two questions. I hope that's allowed. The first one has to do with foreign aid. I really want to know what you and your colleagues are doing to restore foreign aid. We know there are thousands and thousands of people in America who've lost their jobs, and there are thousands of people who are dying or losing their opportunity for education or health care across the world. So it's not really just an economic issue here. It's a moral issue, and it does impact our role internationally. So one question on foreign aid. The second question has to do with, and it ties into the last question, is I still don't understand how we lost so badly last time. And every night we talk about it, we look at the news, we don't understand what happened and what's going on, what you and your colleagues are doing to make sure we get out of this mess, what's happening for the midterms. You know, we've seen people making speeches, and we see people, Cory Booker, all night long, but nobody cares about that. We need to be making a difference and uniting people on certain things. So what are you doing?
Thank you. This is where I give my speech. I'm here in my official capacity. And so I run as a Democrat, but once elected, I represent everyone, Democrats, Republicans, those who voted for me, those who didn't vote for me, and I say the hardest part, those who choose not to vote at all. But I represent everybody. I will touch on that a little bit in a broad conversation, but I can't talk specific political action in this context. On foreign aid, I can talk about that all day long. I mentioned I'm on the Ways and Means Committee. That's what's known as an exclusive committee. You're supposed to be on that and only that committee. If I want a second committee, I have to get special permission. Essentially, in my case, it's Leader Jeffries arguing for me to be on Foreign Affairs. So for the last 3 Congresses, I've been a waived-on member to Foreign Affairs. Good news is I'm on the committee. The bad news is in the speaking order, I often go last. And this is relevant to your question. Last week, Secretary of State Rubio came to speak to the committee. There are 51 or 2 people on the committee. Each one has 5 minutes to ask questions. In a perfect world, that's 250 some odd minutes. That's at least 4 hours. He gave 3 hours to the committee, said, I'm leaving after 3 hours, which he did. So there were a lot of people, Democrats and Republicans, who were not able to ask their questions because he didn't want to give answers. He actually didn't answer the questions of people who did get to ask him questions for the most part. But my question was exactly your question. And we submitted it in writing. I'll let you know if we get an answer. There is a global competition for influence. And it's not just to protect or advance one nation's interest around the world. And the competition is U.S., China, Russia plays into it. Africa is soon to be the most populous continent in the world. Countries are growing, populations are growing, they're young populations, they are resource rich. If those young people live in countries with functioning governments, with quality healthcare and education systems, with opportunities in their countries or the opportunity to get education and to market themselves or their wares around the world, those countries will be successful, their people will be peaceful, and the likelihood of global terrorism finding a root, taking hold, and spreading around the world is diminished. That's why it's in our interest to have stable, competent, capable governments around the world, with people getting the opportunities to succeed where they live and engage in commerce with the countries in their region and across the globe. Foreign aid is our soft power. It is our single best investment. $1 in foreign aid is worth far many more dollars in gunboat diplomacy, is going to far exceed the investment we'll have to make in national security and other things. They go hand in glove. I talk about a 3-legged stool: defense, diplomacy, and development. And so by turning our back on development, we are turning our back on one of our most useful, most cost-effective, most productive tools in our tool chest to make the world better for our country and our people as they live at home and travel the world. That's the question I wanted to ask Secretary Rubio. How do we make sure we protect those interests? Because what they're doing is destroying that. And an example, you talk about saving lives, is PEPFAR. This was a program that was passed under George W. Bush. If you ask President Bush what is he most proud of, I've heard him speak at things like this where he's asked that question. He doesn't hesitate. PEPFAR is his #1 achievement because it has saved millions of lives getting anti-retroviral drugs into Africa where AIDS was a horrible epidemic, and turning the tide and giving people their lives back. And we've turned our back on that. Getting food aid into places where people are going hungry, standing up health care in places, Sudan, where you have people starving, people dying, war going on. We seem to be walking away from that. But it's not just Africa. It's countries in Europe that are struggling, smaller countries. It's countries in Asia. It's countries in our own hemisphere in Latin America as well. So I'm going to continue to fight for an investment. If you ask people how much they think we spend on foreign aid, it's usually somewhere between 10 and 50%. The average is around 20%. The reality is it's less than 1% of our budget. It's the best dollars we spend, and we need to make sure we continue to invest. And it's the best people serving our country. Just like I mentioned Memorial Day and the people who wear the uniform of our nation. My son, who was just calling me, spent 5 years in the Navy, serving our nation around the world. He's in uniform, or was in uniform. The folks who work in USAID and in other diplomatic missions, they don't wear uniforms, but they take just as much risk and they accomplish just as much good for our nation. So I'll fight for them. Thank you.
All right, we have 824. Do we have 824? Okay, right up there.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for hosting the town hall, and thanks to your staff as well. My question is regarding the Organ Donor Protection Act. It's really, again, another thank you for co-sponsoring the act, and also thank you for co-signing the letter that was sent last fall to CMS. So the question is, I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts are on the status of the act and in terms of all that's going on right now with the discussions around Medicare and Medicaid, how that might impact the hopefully the eventual passage of the act.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for bringing up. First of all, the advances we're making on organ transplant, saving lives, and the need to make sure that we're protecting those folks. I will tell you on this issue, there is bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats. I mean, we all know somebody probably at this point in our lives who has received a organ transplant. We probably also know somebody who's waiting for an organ transplant. And so when I talk to my colleagues in the House about this, there's not much debate. I can't, and I just don't know where the administration is on this under Kennedy and the other folks, Dr. Oz with CMS. So I'd like to give you, I'll get your name. I'll give you a more full answer. I just don't have off the top of my head where things stand on that. But within Congress, I can talk about other things. Telemedicine, not related, but anyone used telemedicine in the last 5 years for COVID, right? We all used it. We're trying to protect telemedicine. We're trying to protect so many of the advances that we're making with technology. And we need to make sure that those just don't continue to move forward, but they're available. So I'll come back.
Hi, thank you so much for all of your thoughtful answers. I'm Stacy. I live in Northbrook. I'm a Social Security disability attorney. And so I've been dealing with the Social Security Administration every day for 18 years, and it has never been great, but it's so much worse now, especially since 7,000 of their staff have left because of Doge. You can't get anyone on the phone. I try every day, the Waukegan office. Phone rings for 20 minutes, you're on hold and they disconnect you. And I have like the special numbers. I mean, I know all the buttons to push. What can we do? What can we do to make this agency better? Every 1 in 5 Americans receives benefits from Social Security, and it's impossible to do business with them.
Right. Great question. First thing, let me say, if you are having issues with Social Security or getting a passport or IRS, whatever the case may be, we can help. We can try to help because we're dealing with the same problem Stacy was just talking about. So please reach out to our office and we'll try to find the narrow slot in the wall to break through, whatever the case may be. You mentioned how hard it's been for 18 years. We have been underfunding both the staff and the tools the staff have on so many of our agencies to do the job that they need to do. And that's been an ongoing problem. It's because it's hard to find the money to justify spending the money. It's easy to say, I stopped us from spending this $1 million, but you leave out that part. Had we spent that $1 million, we could save $10 million. And it is not penny wise, pound foolish. It's just foolish, unfortunately. The answer, how do we get there, is investing in people and technology. And DOGE is not wrong in looking for places that are inefficiencies and opportunities to improve efficiencies. They're just going about it in the wrong way. And I'd probably argue that they're going about it for the wrong reasons, but that's a whole nother story. I advised businesses before going to Congress for much of my career. I was in situations where you had to find ways to tighten your belt or find new ways to do things. And you'd go into a situation, there were a number of questions you would ask. And if you were doing a full review, the first question you would ask about a task is, should it be done? Plain and simple. Why are we doing this? Is there a benefit to it? Should it be done? And if the answer is no, you stop doing it. Those are the easiest ones. You just stop doing it, say gone. If the answer is yes, the second question is fairly straightforward. If it should be done, are we the best to do it, or can someone else on the outside do it better? This is true for a company. It's certainly true for the government. And if the answer is there's somebody who can do it better, let them do it. By the way, this is also true in our own personal, whatever we do in our careers, we can ask these questions. And then the last question is, if we're the ones who are best to do it, are we doing it in the best way possible? And almost always you can say, no, there are better ways to do it. We can improve it. Maybe the improvement's on the margins. Maybe the improvement is finding a completely different way to do it. That's not what DOGE did. I described DOGE as weight loss by amputation. They just went in and lopped off things and said, look how much money we saved. And they put it out on their website. And then people started looking at their website and said, well, that didn't save any money. And that not only didn't save any money, that cost us money. And the $2 trillion Elon Musk promised to save is now well under $100 billion. And the cost to the citizens of not being able to get to Social Security, not being able to talk to someone at the IRS, not being able to get their passport, you can run through the list, not being able to get a forecast of the weather, whether you are a pilot flying a plane or in a community worried about a prospective tornado, they almost completely wiped out the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. This is not how you do it. And the costs, we're just beginning to see the costs of the decisions that DOGE was making, not based on analysis, not based on reason, but based on politics and bravado. And so as far as what we're going to do it, like I said, my DOGE Accountability and Transparency Act, stands for data, would be a great way. We just need Mike Johnson to let it come to the floor for a vote. I suspect it would pass if we could get that vote. Do I hear 900? I'm
All
sorry,
right.
wrong.
Do we have 826? Okay. And I know I'm just watching the time, so we're going to try to get through as many questions as possible.
I told my wife I'd pick pizza up at 8:10, so that is our deadline.
Hi, I'm Lisa from Libertyville. I kind of have a twofold question here. So first of all, I know that there's a lot of talk about what can happen in 2026, right? How we can win in 2026. Obviously, I'm praying for a blue massive wave like we've never seen before. But at the same time, I have the daily anxiety about we are living though today, every day, the house is burning. We are in a constitutional crisis. We're beyond a constitutional crisis. We are living in a dictatorship, authoritarian country right now. And I don't think we can really deny that. So I guess I'm really wondering, and I know you don't want to talk in a partisan way, but I am concerned, one, about what is, I would love to see a very uniform, I'll tell you my statement then, I guess. This will be a statement, then a question. I would love to see a collective, uniform message coming out of the Democratic Party, knowing that I think we as citizens, we are living in such a we're in a level of anxiety that we want to know that our leaders are fighting for us, and that we see them on the TV, we see them in social media with a very collective message.
Okay.
A collective message that counters the Republican message. Like just today, I was hearing the Republican message about Medicaid in the bill saying, we're not cutting Medicaid. We're improving it by giving it to the people who truly need it. And so we're taking care of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And so the people who actually need it are going to get it. And there's no cutting whatsoever. So obviously we know that's BS, but people believe that. So I would just love to see the same messaging on, I'm going to say, our side, where it's consistent and collective, consolidated messaging.
Yeah. I'm going to walk a fine line.
Wait, one more thing that's really important. Okay. No. One more thing. Voting rights. Voting rights are being restricted around the country. And so I'm looking forward now to 2026 and saying, is there any input you can give or any sort of information about, do you think that by 2026, when we actually get to our next vote, there will be more restrictive voting going on around the country? Because it seems like that's being attempted in every state.
Let me answer that one, and I'll give a longer answer to the first half. So if you look up HR 14, which is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, we've been trying to pass it for a while. Just a quick aside, every Congress starts anew every 2 years. Whatever doesn't pass in the last Congress gets washed away, and we have to reintroduce it. In every new Congress, the first 10 bills are reserved to the priorities of the majority. So the bill that the Republicans passed last week is HR 1. They get to number 1 through 10. And then 11 through 20 are left for the minority. So when we were in the majority, HR 4 was the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. HR 14 this time, it was introduced earlier this year. We have to protect our Voting Rights Act. We have to, it requires that. I am very worried about efforts to diminish access to the vote, make it harder to vote, harder to register, et cetera, et cetera. I have John Lewis's old office. I carry his legacy with great pride. He always said, don't agonize, organize. And on this is one, no matter what they throw, whatever obstacle they throw in the way of people voting, we have seen that people recognize that voting is their right, their privilege, and something they will stand in line for, walk through the rain for, do whatever's necessary to protect. We need more people. We have to get that message out to the young people, which leads me to, and I'm going to walk this line. I am hoping for a wave in 2 years, or now 18 months. I'm hoping for a wave of reason, and you'll understand why I'm saying that. If reason prevails, if patriots come out and vote to support our Constitution, to recognize what so many people throughout our history have fought and died for, have worked to advance, whether it's with laws or ideals, etc., then I have no doubt, back to that public sentiment, that we're going to see a very different Congress in 2026. And here's the thing, we don't have to wait 18 months for that wave. We have to build it and create it today, and people can come out. I just need 5 Republicans. I don't need them to become Democrats. I need them to join us in standing up against what this administration is trying to do, undermining the rule of law and undercutting the Constitution. Don Bacon this weekend criticized President Trump for his comments about Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump is the only person to not have known who Vladimir Putin was before this weekend. Putin hasn't changed. He hasn't gone crazy. This is who Putin is. He started this war almost 2.5 years ago. It is a war with an intention of not just conquering Ukraine, but reestablishing what was the Soviet Empire that he calls the breakup, the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. we need to get folks like Don Bacon not just to stand up, but to step out and say enough. We're going to, I don't need him to be a Democrat, but I need him to have reason prevail. And I can point to a number of other people who should be willing to step out and step forward. People whose districts are pleading with them to step out and fight what they're seeing as the destruction of our nation. And if we can get those, then we'll get there before November of 26, and it's really January of 27. In the meantime, we just have to, what I say is keep faith in what we know this country is and can be, stay resolutely resilient in the face of whatever they throw at us, and persevere. And that's what we're going to do.
All right, we have time for a few more questions. Do we have 8:39? Okay, right back up.
8:35. I'm here all night.
Hi. It's good. Hi, my name is Kasia. I'm from Highland Park.
Okay, hold it closer to your mouth.
All right. Can you hear me better?
Yep.
Great. So my question builds on what you were just saying in terms of getting just a few Republicans to vote with the Democrats on the advancing the policies that you and your Democratic colleagues are advancing on behalf of your constituents. If you could share a little bit more about any plans or strategies to get those Republican colleagues to vote with you, that would be helpful. And any contingency plans in case they do not, and they continue to not want to vote together for what is reasonable and right. And that's part one of my question. And part two is for those of us not in the government, what do you recommend that we do more of or do that we haven't been doing besides meeting with our representatives, voting, and continuing to exercise our rights so that we can help our representatives in the government and help all of us together maintain our values, our rights and freedoms, and our institutions.
So the second half of the question, I have three sincere answers, some less serious than the others. The less serious answer is, on my way here, I stopped at Potbelly's and got a cold brew milkshake. Whatever your secret delight is, you've got to hold on to that, because that gets the other thing is you can't watch the news 24/7. You have to pace it and stop to smell the roses or spend time with your family or watch mindless TV or read a book or whatever the case may be. But the third and the most important, the most serious thing is we can't let this be normal, and we can't accept it ever as normal. So I'll finish the loop on my three things and why ice cream and whatever it might be is we are in insane times. We can't let it drive us insane. So hold on to the things you love and recognize that it's not normal and we're going to keep fighting. So back to the perseverance. First half of the question, remind me real quickly. Oh, how to get Republicans. That was it. It's a number of steps. So I mentioned these long sessions we had a couple weeks ago in the committees where we kept introducing amendments and forced those Republicans to vote on the amendments. You know, on Ways and Means, there's only a couple who are in swing districts. Two, in fact, Mike Carey and Brian Fitzpatrick. So the amendments were tailored to we understand what's important in their district, what they're going to have to go home and explain why they voted against something. Similarly in the Energy and Commerce Committee and so forth, making them own the votes they take. We all have our records. We all, you know, it's one thing to say that I'm on a diet, and it's another thing to stop on the way to a town hall and get a milkshake. I'll have to explain that to my wife. That's not serious, but you got to do the same thing on the votes you take. And so we are putting pressure on them in that respect. And on the campaign side, you'll see ads in their districts calling them out for that, or billboards, whatever the case may be. And in those districts is where you see the folks going in and having the town halls where it can have that effect that your representative won't talk to you, but we got folks who will and will give you the truth. And so That's some of the things that we're doing. At the end of the day, each of us, I report to all of you and the 750,000 people in the 10th district. I need to be able to convince a majority that I'm working for the priorities and representing the values of the 10th district. And if I'm not, the voters should say, we want somebody else. We need to convince or help people understand that what some of these guys are doing and saying in Washington is not what they're doing and saying at home. And that these are districts. We have about 110,000 people, I think is the number, who depend on Medicaid in our district here. There are, out of 750,000, 1 in 7, 1 in 6, whatever the case may be. There are districts where that number is 1 in 3, 1 in 2. And their representatives are voting against their interests. We just have to show them that. So that's the strategy. We can do 2 more.
2 more. Okay.
Maybe
All right.
3.
Yeah, I think we have time for 2 more. Can I call 862? Okay.
Hello, I'm Dan from Northbrook. And I probably have a little bit of that problem you were talking about earlier about 24/7 watching the news. Yeah. But this weekend I kept hearing that the Democrats have 3 open seats in the House. And if we could have gotten those seats filled, then perhaps there would have been a way to defeat the Republicans' big billionaire bill that just went through. 3 could have easily made a difference. Connected to that is that it was said Democrats are old. Republicans are old too, but there are more old Democrats. And there's a movement to make the party younger. So I'd like to know your comments about that.
So the first thought that comes to mind is Ronald Reagan's line with Mondale, "I refuse to make the youth and inexperience of my opponent an issue." I don't know if you remember when he said that. It's a tough issue. I believe that I'm in my 6th term. I'll be 64 in August. I had a stress test this morning. I'm still standing, so that's a good sign. And the doctor hasn't called and said, come to the hospital. So, knock wood, we're in good shape. But there are a number of members who have been there. It's not how long they've been there. It's how on their game they are. And are they bringing the value? Each district's electing their member. Now, the 3 vacancies, it's not clear. The first loss, it's been a tough year. The first loss we had was Sylvester Turner, who literally after he'd just gotten elected last year. He was a new member of Congress from Houston. I think he was 70 years old, so not young. But he was he sat through the president's speech to the joint session and died that night, just out of nowhere. I'm not drawing a link, but I do feel sorry that was his last experience. And he was excited to be a part of Congress. He was going to join the New Democratic Coalition, the moderate Dems that I lead. I was excited about that. We lost Raul Grijalva, who was fighting cancer. He'd been in there for a long time. He was in his 70s. I don't know exactly how old he was. He'd been sick for a while and made the decision to run again, and the people elected him. I just don't know well enough to speak to that one in detail. Jerry Connolly, who died last week. Jerry was a dear friend. We were on Foreign Affairs together. I mean, he was a dear friend. He was a former vice chair of the New Dem Coalition. He was diagnosed last fall with esophageal cancer, and they gave him a better than even chance of beating it. And he was fighting it, and he was in a good place, and he got reelected. And then he ran for and was elected to be the senior Democrat on the Oversight Committee. I supported him in that role. He had worked for it. He had earned it. And he said, I'll always be honest with you. And then a month ago, 6 weeks ago, his cancer took a turn for the worse, as happens, and he died last week. In those cases, it's illness, not age. And age can hit anyone. I said it was a hard week. My former colleague, Joe Crowley, lost his son, Colin, who was 25, to cancer. Cancer doesn't discriminate, as we all know. But there are members who are there for a very long time. I tip my hat to Senator Durbin for making the announcement that it was time to pass the baton. It was the right thing to do. And I'll tip my hat to Durbin for a lifetime of service to the state of Illinois as well. You didn't ask it. I'm going to touch it. I may regret this. I was one of the first members of Congress to call on President Biden to pass the torch last July. We don't need to relitigate the past. Had I saw what I saw sooner than I saw it, say that 3 times fast, I would have come to the same conclusion much quicker. That's something that history will evaluate and will go forward. We need to be clear that people need to be clear with themselves. If I can't do this job, there are a lot of people who can do the job just as well as any of us. We're all replaceable, and we need to pass it on. I'll step on another rail here. The Republicans have a rule that you can only lead a committee for 3 terms, either as the ranking member or the chair. Now, after you lead one committee for 3 terms, if you have the power and influence, you become the chair of another committee right away. Okay. But that churn, that oxygenation does create, I think, a positive effect. My proposal for the Republicans, or for the Democrats rather, because they don't support, the majority of my caucus does not support term limits. I would say have senior members of the committee, the chair or the ranking member, have the members of the committee give a thumbs up or thumbs down, private vote. But the 18 members on the Ways and Means Committee would tell you that Richie Neal is the greatest leader. We will follow him. He takes care of his members. We are allowed to get have our input into what we do. We would give a unanimous thumbs up. There are other senior Democrats who might get unanimous thumbs down, and then people can make their decision. So I think there are things we can do to try to create that oxygenation of the system, because there are a lot of people who leave Congress too soon because they don't see opportunities for them, and there are times when people stay too long because they don't feel they have anywhere else to go. So it's a tough decision. Right.
You have to respect folks' time.
All right, it is late. Let me say thank you. I will wrap up. You have one more?
One more question.
Okay.
All right, and we have 8:55. Do we have 8:55?
You're still off. It's 8:48.
Okay. 8:41? Okay.
Hi, I'm Craig from Highland Park. I'll try to make this a yes or no question, but earlier in the evening,
I'm a politician. There are no such things as yes or no
I'll do my
questions.
best. I'm sorry. The first question was about the courts and the immunity ruling, and then you ended that answer with mention of holding the president accountable. There was also from over here somewhere a comment about generally knowing that the party is fighting for us, etc. One of the central questions right now seems to be what happens if the president and the administration defy court rulings as they percolate up through the system. So let's just play that all the way up to the top, that there's some hypothetical Supreme Court ruling and the president and the administration choose to defy that. Would that, in your opinion, be an impeachable offense?
Wait, would that be? Hang on.
I understand, but
I will answer what everyone else is thinking, but finish the question.
Well, I understand, and without exampple on
No,
top of my head,
would
I'm not
that
gonna do
be-
that. Would that be an impeachable offense?
Okay. I'm going to avoid the question. I'll explain why. Is all the talk about impeachment, we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there. Hang on, let me finish. I'll touch it. I had a colleague who wanted to introduce a privilege resolution on impeachment, and my conversation with him was he has one arrow in his quiver, and he's going to fire that arrow from a distance farther than it can reach, and it will fall harmlessly in the grass with no effect, and then you don't have the arrow. I think there is probably more than one example of actions that could bring a discussion of impeachment. I'll say it that way. But I also know there is zero possibility at the moment for an action to move forward or to achieve a conviction in the Senate. And so we are fighting an existential battle we've all talked about already. And we need to focus on where we can have effect, where we can slow the actions that are being taken, and try to stand strong. Someone mentioned Abrego Garcia, and I'll touch on that. I can't speak to the life history of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, but there are facts that I know are facts. There was a court order preventing Mr. Garcia from being deported back to El Salvador. The administration, on record, fact, said he was sent to El Salvador due to administrative error. It was a mistake. The court said you need to facilitate. This is where I'm going to claim I'm an engineer. English is a second language. I'll let them debate what facilitate means. I'm going to interpret it. You need to bring him back because he shouldn't have been sent there. And the administration is defying that on their left foot, on their right foot, sideways, backward, with all kinds of lame excuses. If they wanted him back and they asked for him back, I have no doubt that El Salvador and the president, Bukele, would send him back. And then let the process proceed, and whatever happens. I'm not going to judge the process. We have legal processes for a reason. No one asked me the question, but I was ready with my pocket constitution about due process. Due process applies to everyone in this country. 22 times in the Constitution, the word citizens used, 49 times the word person. Only 3 times are the two used together, and that's in defining who can be a representative, who can be a senator, and who can be president. A person who is a citizen, age 25, can be a member of the House, 30, the member of the Senate, and 35, naturalized citizen, or born here or naturalized before the Constitution, can be president. Article 5, due process, says all persons get due process, period, stop. And so we need to have that due process. So we are on the line of ignoring a court order, of getting to that constitutional crisis point. Some people are going to say yes, some people are going to say no. I'm going to draw the distinction between soccer and basketball. I'm actually proud of this one that I just thought of it. If I step on the line in basketball, I'm out of bounds. If I step on the line in soccer, I'm not out of bounds. So different interpretations. I don't know what we're playing here, but if he crosses that line, if the administration crosses that line, that's why the public sentiment is so important. That's why having these town halls are so important. That's why all of you reaching out and writing letters to my office, and we're getting anywhere from 3,000, I think our peak was 12,000 letters in a week, and we're trying to write back to every one of you. That engagement is critical to keep our democracy vibrant, so that if and when the line doesn't become an issue, they've crossed over that line, that public sentiment rises up and says, no, we're going to protect our Constitution. And the court's orders are going to stand. The idea that the court's word is the final word, the Supreme Court is the ultimate word, that is all we have to hold on to, so we have to protect it. So we're all in this together. I've got a very important role representing you in Washington. You help me with your letters and your calls and your support. I cannot thank you enough. I don't know where this goes. I don't know how this ends, but we're in it together. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to get pizza on time, and I'm going to make it. My son's graduating law school tomorrow, so I'm going to make it there on time. So thank you guys very much.